Apple je održao svoju godišnju konferenciju za developere Worldwide Developers Conference 2025. Na konferenciji je predstavljen najveći redizajn softvera u istoriji kompanije sa ciljem celovitije i korisnije ponude za korisnike. Razočarenje investitora zbog nedostatka bilo kakvih inovacija i poboljšanja u pogledu AI tehnologija bilo je osetno. A detaljnije o onome što je predstavljeno na konferenciji i daljim izgledima za Apple razgovaram sa podpredsjednikom za uređaje za EMEA region u IDC-u, Francisco Jeronimo. Hello, Francisco. Thank you for joining me here today. You were at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. What was the atmosphere and what was in focus?
Yeah, good morning. The atmosphere is very different when compared to watching the keynote online. The interesting thing is the reaction from developers when the announcements are made. And of course, this is a developers conference. What they are really interested in is in understanding what kind of tools, what kind of developments Apple will offer to help them to improve their apps, to improve the services they offer. And one interesting thing was, and there's a huge positive reaction when Apple announced that they will be opening the large language models, the AI foundation models, to developers to adapt their applications to run artificial intelligence. And that will run on device, on the PC, on the Mac, on the iPhone, etc., and will also be secure on the private cloud from Apple. So there was a huge reaction, and that will have a massive implication for end users, of course, for developers, because our apps will be more intelligent in the future. And this is not, there's a lot of criticism about Apple not being able to catch up with their competitors. But at the end of the day, it's not just Apple doing the entire AI development, it's the range of thousands and thousands of developers that need to adapt their apps for the iPhone, the Mac, the iPad, etc.
You mentioned AI, and we will talk more about that later, but at the heart of conference was a comprehensive naming overhaul of Apple's software platforms. How significant is this change, and what's the strategy behind this move?
This is quite a strong move, and at the end of the day, the strategy is to make it more understandable for end users. Because if you ask any consumer today using an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad, they don't really know what is the OS version, and even if they know, they don't know when it was launched for the first time. So most people don't really know how old is the OS version they have on their phones if they haven't been doing the updates. By releasing the OS, the platform versions linked to a specific year name, that becomes much easier. And also it shows a much more consistent cadence of developments over the next years. It's a lot easier for someone to know whether they are on iOS 26 or whether they are on iOS 24 or in the future 27 or 28. So they know what is the latest version they have, because it's a lot more easier to link that to the year. And by doing that across all platforms, it makes users' lives a lot easier. And that's what Apple is doing, is improving the consistency across their platforms. And that's a very strong message and strategy from Apple.
Now back to the AI. Recently, Apple marked 1 year of Apple Intelligence, and the mood among conference guests is lukewarm in that respect. Does this pose an issue for Apple, and can they catch up with AI giants such as OpenAI and Meta?
Yeah, AI has been a hot topic and in the works from Apple. Last year, they launched Apple Intelligence. There was a lot of pressure from the market to catch up with the likes of Google and Meta, etc. And this year, they took a step back because there was some criticism about what they announced last year that was not available and didn't become available until later in the year. And some of the features, they are not even available in many different countries. Apple Intelligence not being available in a significant number of countries. They expanded that this year. So what they did was to focus on what really matter to consumers, which is incremental steps into the experience without being too disruptive, and especially if they cannot deliver that promise in the short term. They were very clear at the beginning of the keynote that Siri, for instance, probably the most expected announcement, will not be available because they need more time to work on it until later this year or next year. And I think that's a very strong message, because at the end of the day, Apple has never been known for being the first bringing new disruptive technology to the market. They always prioritized quality over speed. And last year, I think they rushed on the announcements, and that's why they are correcting course and now focusing on what they can deliver straight away. And what they announced yesterday is already available for those who have access to the beta versions of the different operating systems. They can download and they can try it. I've been trying over the last half a day some of the features, and they really work. So it's a good step forward. But of course, for industry experts, for those who really look into the market, they are always comparing what Google and others are doing versus Apple. But the majority of Apple users don't really know what Google is launching, or Samsung, or the Chinese brands. What they care is what they have on their iOS or Mac or iPads. And that's something that is a bit more of an industry kind of criticism, rather than just what consumers are really asking to have straight away.
And with tariff war and trade uncertainties in mind, what's your outlook for Apple?
Yeah, the trade war and the tariffs in particular are having a huge impact. In the short term, the impact is positive, because there was an increase in production, and there was a lot of units and iPhones in particular that were shipped to the US to stockpile ahead of eventual tariffs taking place. But it's a very volatile situation. What is happening today may be completely different from tomorrow. Regardless of what kind of tariffs we will end up, unless there's no tariffs, there will be an impact, because prices will have to go up, particularly in the US. There's a huge disruption to the supply chain that will also impact other countries. So the outlook, the IDC outlook for the smartphone market for this year we reduced the forecast, so the market is gonna grow at a lower pace than what we expected at the end of the last year. But on the other side, when we look into the PC market, we increase the forecast because there are other factors and other drivers for that growth. We are coming to the end of life of Windows 10. A lot of enterprises are upgrading from their machines, and that will help the Apple, because the impact will be bigger in the US, definitely, for Apple, but there's and they can offset that impact with other regions like Europe, where the market continues to grow and there's less impact from the tariffs. So it's a mixed reaction, but definitely some impact, either prices going up for consumers or sales coming down, because the moment prices are increased, of course, sales tend to decline. So it's a mixed reality. It's a mixed reality for Apple. Let's see what happens, because it's really hard to say without knowing what is the end, how the negotiations that are happening now between the US and China in London end up, and that will give us a better picture.
Definitely a lot of uncertainties. Francisco, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.